Hello and welcome everyone to another one of Quantum's Soul Level 120 PvP build series videos. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Intelligence Dexterity build that I took to the arena a little while ago and absolutely tore it up. We ended up getting to gold rank in one sitting. It was very effective using only the Friede's Great Scythe, and that is kind of what this build is made around. However, when I took that build to the arena, it was actually an outdated version of the character where we kind of made that class over 10 months ago. So I decided to come to Rosaria, update the build, and kind of walk you guys through what I think is the most optimized way to allocate some of your stats for the intelligence dexterity based character. Now before we go any further in the video, I do want to make a note that there is absolutely no PvP in this video. It's purely just looking at the character from a stat and equipment basis, going over some basic fundamentals as to why the character kind of comes together in this way, why I made some of the choices that I made. If you want to see the actual PvP matches, check the links in the description below. There will be some links to a few of the PvP montages where we analyze specific matchups and weapons. You can check that out for all the action if you want. But if you want to learn about the build, learn about what I think is the most optimized way to kind of create this kind of build, definitely stay tuned on this video. And then when you go into those PvP videos, hopefully you'll learn a lot more into how this build kind of connects with the weapons and how we use them in tandem to basically tear up the competition. But one of the questions you're probably asking yourself right off the bat is, well, you know, I heard that quality and strength builds and stuff like that are kind of top tier. Why would I want to make an intelligence dexterity build? Is it really worth it? All for mainly just one weapon? Like, is it actually worth it? In my opinion, if you kind of are sick of the meta, air quotes, and you want something fun and new to try that is still semi-competitive, yes, this build is definitely worth it. It's a very fun build to use. It's not unable to hold its own in PvP matches. It can definitely do so. It has a good diverse range of weapons and spells available to it. So it's not completely devoid of value. It's not something you're going to really struggle with to win. It definitely has a lot of pros to it. And it definitely adds another level of I guess, diversity to the game. So I would say yes, if you already have like your top tier PvP character and you're looking for something different to try out, definitely give this character a go. It's fun, it's new, it's fresh, it's entertaining, it's action packed. It's really fun to use overall. So before we actually get into the actual weapons and equipment, we're going to take a look at the stat allocation. It's going to be very basic analysis here. So looking at our health, attunement, and endurance. Our health and endurance are at 35 apiece. Ideally, you'd want those up to 40. You can use the prisoner's chain as a ring if you wanted to bump those up. I opted not to for the most part. But the reason that you want a lot of health with a spellcaster is because if you're going to primarily use your weapon as your main source of damage, and in this case, Friede's Great Scythe, you're definitely going to want to be able to have enough health to trade and take a hit. If you watch those PvP montages I linked in the description, you're going to see a lot of the time when we use the go-to move for the Friede's Great Scythe, which is the L2 into R1, right? This jumping in attack with going crazy with the two scythes. It doesn't use FP, but when you jump in, your opponent might start up one of their attacks, and you are basically going to take one hit. But the goal is that when you jump in with this attack, you will end up hitting your opponent for a big combo, whereas they might only hit you for one hit. And at the end of the day, the whole goal of PvP at a semi-competitive level is to basically come out with more damage and a higher life bar on each exchange with your opponent than the damage that your opponent can do to you, if that makes sense. So basically, you know, if an opponent is using a greatsword for an example, and they swing with an R1 once as you jump in, yeah, they may clip you for, you know, 300 points of damage, but your full combo here might end up doing between 600 to 900 points of damage. And at the end of the day, your life bar is still going to be higher than theirs at the end of that exchange, not the end of the day. But that is why you want a lot of health, because yes, you do want to be able to take risks. You do want to be able to come out on top on trades with the higher life bar. And because we're not, you know, playing runaway all day, trying to cast spells, we are being the aggressor. We are using our weapon for our primary source of damage. You have to kind of get into the mindset of not every hit I'm going to make is going to be a clean hit. So I do have to expect trades. You know, and how do you win on trades? Well, you have a lot of life, so you can absorb some hits and then come out on top on those exchanges. And again, if you watch those PvP videos, you'll see a lot of the time that's what happens, and that's how the build kind of plays out. Endurance, obviously pretty self-explanatory, very basic. You need a lot of endurance no matter what build you're using. Stamina is pretty much the basis of the Soul series games, believe it or not. You need stamina to perform any kind of action, whether it be offensive or defensive, to attack, to roll, to block, to parry, whatever. You need a lot of stamina. So anywhere between 35 to 40 endurance. I've always been an endurance heavy focused person. I like to have a lot of options available to me, and in order to have those options available, you need to have a lot of stamina. So our stamina, you can see there with all the ring buffs and whatever, like the Ring of Favor, we're up to 163 stamina, which is manageable. Ideally, you'd want 40 stamina to max out at the soft cap, but 35 is more than enough. So attunement only at 14, and you may be thinking, well, that's kind of low. Why do you only have 14 attunement for a spellcaster? Well, we're not really relying on spells. Spells are not our primary source of damage, and the two spells that I have equipped here, the Crystal Hail and the Great Soul Arrow, they're mostly just for like chipping away at opponents, forcing my opponent to roll. These spells don't really do a lot of damage, but what they might do is scare your opponent into rolling around. Like if they're in the middle of the Crystal Hail, they might roll around, and that may give you an opportunity to go in for a quick punish and catch a roll. So the spells are more of a utility option more than a damage option to kind of condition your opponent. Again, it's that extra level of mix-up that adds to your game as a spellcaster that other builds don't have. So if you wanted to go a damage route, yes, you could equip stuff like Crystal Soul Spear. You could technically have more attunement if you want, but we don't really need it. We don't use a lot of FP, especially considering a lot of the weapons that we do like to use for the spellcaster don't use FP, right? The L2 into R1 here doesn't use FP. Same with the Moonlight Greatswords when you two-hand it. This is our other go-to weapon here. When you two-hand this weapon and you do the charged R2, right, that only uses a weapon durability. It doesn't use up FP. So we don't need a lot of FP. We don't need a lot of attunement slots for that reason. So that's why our attunement is so low. Our vitality is at the base of 10. That is the starting value for the mercenary, which is our starting class here. Our strength is very low at 13, and the reason for that is because we never really one-hand any weapons, or if we do, they're weapons that require very low strength to begin with. The only two weapons I think that we can't one-hand, air quotes, is the Moonlight Greatsword, which technically we could one-hand. We only lose the physical stat scaling on that. We still do almost or over 400 points of pure magic damage, even if we one-hand the Moonlight Greatsword and the Crystal Astora's Greatsword. And the reason for that is because for Greatswords, the one-handed moveset, they're a little slow for startup. I personally like to two-hand these weapons. The moveset is a little bit better in my opinion. Same with the Greatsword. And you can see that, you know, while we one-hand it, it does have the X on the weapon icon, but when we two-hand it, the X goes away and we gain the full damage of the weapon. 631 for the Astora's Greatsword there, and 562 I believe, yeah, for the Moonlight Greatsword. Okay, so in case you don't know, the reason that your weapons are able to be wielded that way, two-handed with the full requirement, is because whenever you two-hand your weapon, your strength gets multiplied by 1.5. So basically our strength when two-handing becomes 13 plus 6.5, which is essentially just 19. So anything that requires 19 or less strength, we can two-hand without any penalty to our damage stat. Obviously the main focus of the build though is the dexterity and the intelligence. At 40 dexterity, or our actual stat is 37 because I am using the Karthus Milk Ring here. So if we de-equip that, you can see our dexterity is at 37. The reason that our dexterity is so high is because the Friede's Great Scythe and a lot of the other smaller weapons that you may want to use with this kind of spellcaster, like the Sharp Lothric Sword, and you can use Crystal Magic Weapon on top of that for a lot of damage, good scaling. But also the Friede's Great Scythe, which is our go-to weapon, has A scaling with both dexterity and intelligence. And you gain a lot of damage points, up to 40 dexterity and 40 intelligence per level that you put into those. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to talk to Rosaria, and you guys are going to see just how the stats kind of add up when you put points towards dexterity and intelligence. So if we go up to our base of what we need for these weapons, and we're going to start from a level of 30 on each dexterity and intelligence. So look at the R weapon 1 on attack power. That's Friede's Great Scythe. For every 1 point of dexterity, we're going to gain about 4 to 6 points of damage, which is definitely worth it. So you can see from 30 to 31, we gain 6 points of physical damage on our Friede's Great Scythe. And if we go up all the way up to 40, you can see that we gain quite a lot of damage. Okay, 3 points on the last from 39 to 40, And then if we go above 40, it's only 1 point. So 1 level for 1 point of damage. Not really worth it at that point. So up to 40, that's the soft cap. That's where we want to be. So I opted for 37 because I used the Karthus Milk Ring to bump it up to 40. A little extra bonus to get up to 40 there. You can do whatever you want. Of course, if you use something like the Prisoner's Chain to bump up your endurance, your vigor, and your vitality, you may go a little bit lower on these stats and then go a little bit higher on your dexterity. It's totally up to you what you want to do there. So you do have some leeway with this build. It's whatever makes you comfortable. Intelligence, while yes, you do technically only want to soft cap it off at 40. You can see there we gain a little bit less, about 2 to 4 points of damage for each level of intelligence. But you also gain a lot of scaling for your spells if you're going to use something like Crystal Magic Weapon, if you're going to use the Moonlight Greatsword, which is primarily a magic-based damage weapon. So that's why I opted to go a little bit higher, up to 50, just in case we wanted to go damage spells or use a different kind of weapon that scales a little bit heavier on magic. But of course, you could, if you wanted to be really efficient, keep this at 40, keep dexterity at 40, and put these extra 10 points, maybe back to your endurance, up to your vitality to increase your defense and equip load, maybe even to your strength. It doesn't matter. But overall, you definitely want at least 40 dexterity and 40 intelligence. That's where the soft caps kick in, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of level and damage. Aside from that, our luck stat is at the base of 9, and our faith is only at 11 from its starting stat of 8, so that we can use Friede's Great Scythe. That's the only reasons for those. Alright, sorry for that little notification. That was my telephone, or my cell phone. But hopefully that explains the breakdown quite well for you guys. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comment section below, and we can address them with some responses. So before we wrap up the video, we're briefly going to go over our equipment load and our ring setup. The weapons, they're pretty basic. I just have a few general weapons to use here for the most part. The Aquamarine Dagger for your quick weapon here, and you can use it with the Oak Shield or even the Black Knight Shield. And you can use weapon arts through this, which is really good. The weapon kind of has, it doesn't seem as long as a straight sword, but it kind of has the moveset of a dagger while being a lot longer. So the R1 is like a very fast swiping motion, and the R2 is like a thrust. It's a very good weapon to catch people, chase them down if you're trying to chip them out maybe. Very, very good for that. Like I discussed earlier, you can use the Lothric sword, something that has good base scaling for dexterity, and use Crystal Magic Weapon on it if you're going for a sword and shield combo. If you want to parry, switch it up to a parrying shield. You do have that very powerful combination available to you with very high damage, which is also excellent. You can go a Greatsword route, the Moonlight Greatsword, just like the Onyx Blade, one of the most useful and quite amazing greatswords in the game, simply for its utility. The R2 and the L2 do a lot of damage, especially if you hit them with the weapon art portion or the magic portion and the blade. It can do a lot of damage, and just the general great sword is good for countering a lot of smaller weapons in general. If you're fighting somebody who's really fishing for parries, you do have the Astora's Greatsword at your disposal for your ultra weapon of choice. I personally went with this one. It's always a good choice on any build. Lightweight, low stat requirements, very good to have on hand. We have a mace on hand simply for countering the Ring Knight paired Ultra Great Swords. The Perseverance skill honestly is good for countering a lot of things, but especially that. But having a mace on hand should be on every build. It has low stat requirements, it does decent damage, it's a very good weapon to have. And finally, of course, our Friede's Great Scythe, our go-to weapon. Basically, why you're making this build, for the fun factor of it, basically. So that is the way the build kind of breaks down staff. You can use whatever you want. I personally just went with the Court Sorcerer staff. Same with the shield. Armor setup wise, I kind of went a little bit more for Fashion Souls, but you usually want to use the Crown of Dusk because this does add extra magic damage to your magic based weapons as well as your spells. So if you look at Friede's Great Scythe from a damage perspective, you can see if we take off the headpiece, our damage for the scythe goes down to 641. We put on the headpiece, it goes up to 654. So sorry, 641 to 654. What is that? A difference of 13 magic damage that we're doing extra. So there's no reason not to use it. If you wanted to go a little bit heavier on poise armor or defensive armor, you could, of course. But like I said, personally go for fashion. So this is usually the setup that I go with. Black leggings, Outrider Knight gauntlets, Wolf Knight armor, and Crown of Dusk. Of course, there's a lot better armor than the Wolf Knight armor out there in terms of defense to poise ratio, or defense to weight, poise to weight ratios. But again, I think that this one looks really nice, and it kind of goes well. It's blue, kind of like magic. I don't know, up to you. But if you want to optimize, you could change it up a little bit more. Ring setup wise, you have your 2 staple rings, the Ring of Favor and the Stamina Ring. And then these other 2 slots are kind of up to your personal preference. Like I mentioned earlier, you could use a Prisoner's Chain if you wanted to bump up some of your stats. I go with the Karthus Milk Ring because I think the invisible rolling actually kind of bodes well for a magic character. If you're trying to be aggressive, they really don't know what you're doing sometimes or where you're going to roll into, and then you can kind of just come out with that scythe out of nowhere and just jump in. So even though I don't really utilize a tactic like that all too much, in the videos that I uploaded, I have started using it a lot more. And that's kind of my go-to thing now. The last ring slot, I personally go with one of the Lloyd rings, and in this case, I do go for the shield ring over the sword ring simply because, like I mentioned earlier again, when you initiate this attack, you're expecting, or at least I'm expecting when I jump in, my opponent to react and try to hit me out of my attack. So I'm expecting to take damage first from his attack before I actually jump in for the combo. So in that case, the defense ring works more in my favor because if I was to use the attack ring, maybe I'd get 1 swipe in before my opponent traded with me, and the rest of my combo wouldn't be affected by the sword ring. So the defense ring definitely plays a bigger role. Plus, you don't have as high of health as some of the other builds, like 39 vigor. So it does actually work in your favor quite well. As soon as you take that first hit, you could also switch it out to the Sun Princess ring to start recovering some of that HP, or even one of the Pontiff rings. I haven't actually tested this out yet, but I do believe that this combo, the R1 combo, it does do like 4 or 5 hits, maybe even more if you catch someone's roll with the third sequential L1, or sorry, the third sequential L2 R1, because it does a true combo of about 4 hits, and then the third sequential move doesn't actually combo, but it could roll catch or hit your opponent out of an attack if they think they can contest you mid-combo, and you can definitely build up a lot of consecutive hits, where the Pontiff Eye rings could definitely benefit you. So definitely try it out. There's a lot to experiment with this build. It's a very interesting build, but that is the breakdown, guys. I'm sorry if this seems very basic for some of you, but this is the goal of the video, is to kind of bring and shed some light on ways to efficiently create some characters that can really help you succeed a little bit more in PvP, because the way that your character is built is honestly like half the battle in PvP. Yes, reactions and skill does play a big role, spacing, all that stuff, but if you don't have an effective build, 1 or 2 hits, right, if you take too much damage or you're not doing enough damage yourself, the scaling doesn't work out in your favor, you're at a significant disadvantage and you're playing a very uphill battle. No matter how skilled you are, why make it harder for yourself, right? So anyways, let me know what you think. Let me know if anything would be different for your build, or if you've tried something different. Definitely let me know in the comments below, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. That is the build. Thank you for watching. Quantum is out.